right, we're going to get started. Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. My name is Megan Riley, and I am the Education and Outreach Manager for the North American Marine Environment Protection Association, also known as NAMEPA. I'd like to thank you so much for joining us this afternoon for our Sea Safety Series, Marine Environmental Awareness and Celebration of Earth Day. We are the North American Marine Environment Protection Association, also known as NAMEPA. Too fast. And our mission is preserving the marine environment by promoting sustainable maritime industry best practices and educating the public to save our seas. And we're joined with Carlene, who is our co-founder and CEO. So Carlene, do you want to say anything about NAMEPA?
Well, I just want to say that when I created NAMEPA almost 18 years ago, I recognized the confluence of the maritime industry wanting to hold itself responsible, accountable, and proactive about protecting the marine environment at the same time that society was demanding it. I'm excited that we've grown and evolved into the organization we are now. I'm also excited by the fact that when I started NAMEPA almost 18 years ago, I was known as a salty tree hugger. And it wasn't said with admiration. And I'm just really impressed and pleased at how, as a community, as an industry, and as a society, we've evolved into one that does put our environment high up on the list of priorities in terms of, safety and life, safety and the environment, and safety at sea. So thank you very much for joining us today, and I look forward to hearing what our expert panelists have to contribute.
Thanks, Carlene. And let's meet our industry panelists this afternoon. Our first panelist is Buddy Custard, who is the President and Chief Executive Officer of the Alaska Shadow Network. He has extensive knowledge and expertise working in maritime operations from both the public and private sectors, including serving in the U.S. Coast Guard for over 30 years, attaining the rank of captain, and as a senior manager for an oil exploration production company operating in the U.S. Arctic outer continental shelf for over 3 years. He served on board 7 Coast Guard cutters in both the Atlantic and Pacific regions, commanding 4 of the cutters while accumulating over 12 years of sea duty. Prior to leading Alaska Shadow Network, Buddy served as the president and CEO of the Maritime Prevention and Response Network, as well as general manager of the Alaska Shadow Corporation, guiding in the consolidation of both organizations. Buddy is a graduate of Colorado State University in Fort Collins, Colorado, where he received a Bachelor of Science degree in wildlife biology with a minor in criminology. He earned a Master of Strategic Studies from the U.S. Army War College and is a graduate of Homeland Security Executive Leaders Program, Center for Homeland Defense and Security, Naval Postgraduate School in Monterey, California. Thanks so much for joining us today, Buddy.
Thank you for having me. Thank you very much, Megan.
Our second panelist is Glenn Wiltshire, a 30-year U.S. Coast Guard veteran and is acting director for the Broward County Port Everglades Department. He leads one of the world's busiest cruise ports in South Florida's main seaport for receiving energy products and a top containerized cargo seaport in Florida in the United States. His responsibilities include managing the seaport's diverse maritime initiatives. And joining Port Everglades in 2006 as Deputy Port Director, he has successfully implemented several innovative programs to support increasing cargo, cruise, and petroleum volumes. He works closely with U.S. Customs and Border Protection and other state and federal agencies to introduce new technology such as facial recognition, mobile, and automated passport control. He currently serves as a member of the South Florida District Export Council for the U.S. Department of Commerce and is the president of the Florida Ocean Alliance. Prior to joining Port Everglades, he was the U.S. Coast Guard captain of the port for New York, New Jersey. He graduated from the United States Coast Guard Academy and received a master's degree in public administration from the John F. Kennedy School of Government, Harvard University. Thanks so much for joining us, Glenn.
Oh, thank you, Megan. Looking forward to today's discussion.
And our last panelist is NAMEPA's own Molly Dushay, the Education and Outreach Director and Regions Director and MIPSIC Director. Molly has a deep-rooted passion for the marine and environmental sciences, which sparked in her youth growing up on Long Island Sound. In a role at MIPSIC, she leads strategic efforts to promote maritime education in our nation's primary and secondary schools through partnership and resource sharing. As Education and Outreach Director for NAMEPA, Molly spearheads NAMEPA's education and outreach initiatives around public and student environmental stewardship and marine environmental awareness for maritime personnel. With a primary focus on developing and implementing comprehensive programs, she engaged participants on mission-driven initiatives, grant-based projects, and informative programs in collaboration with a diverse audience, including the public, students, and both shoreside and offshore maritime personnel. Molly is also a secondary teacher, a science teacher, an adjunct professor at Sacred Heart University, and she graduated with a Bachelor of Science in Biology and a Master in the Art of Teaching from Sacred Heart University. Thanks so much for being here with us today, Molly.
Thank you for having me.
And so we're going to jump right into our questions. So my first question I'm going to pose to Buddy. What are some of the key environmental challenges facing the maritime industry today?
Well, Megan, one of the big challenges is decarbonization. The maritime industry is basically facing a pivotal moment as it undergoes the monumental shift from fossil fuels to emission neutral solutions, alternative fuels. There's been some recent changes with the IMO on the guidelines and their goals and everything, and they've become very aggressive goals to try to be by 2050 to reduce greenhouse gas emissions from ships with checkpoints along the way in 2030 and 2040. So that alone in itself is a major shift in what the shipping industry is having to manage. Is how do you convert the old ships to alternative fuels and then new constructions and everything else. And the alternative fuels are many. I mean, you have liquid petroleum gas, liquid natural gas, methanol, ammonium, hydrogen, biodiesel, as well as the imagination as technology keeps emerging. So I would say, for the shipping industry, that is one of the key things that they're working on. And that cascades over to a lot of other issues at the port level, because as you shift over to alternative fuels, then you have to build the infrastructure to support that, those the bunkering for those fuels. So that there's like I said, branches and sequels to every new initiative and so forth. So those are things, and I'm in the environmental response business, and now that creates different challenges. Over the years, we've gotten quite good at how do you clean up oil. Well, now it's a different, we have to ask a bunch of different questions for emergency response and everything with the alternative fuels and everything. So I'd say decarbonization is probably one of the biggest forcing mechanism that the shipping industry is having to adapt to eliminate greenhouse gas emissions to further protect the environment.
Glenn, do you have anything to add on one of those changes that are facing the maritime industry?
No, I think that's Buddy hit, that's the big one. That's getting the most attention, obviously, at the International Maritime Organization and other things. But it's really part of a broader societal focus on sustainability. Emissions reduction and is just one aspect of it. But you look at shipping, it's ballast water, it's a number of things that occur on a day-to-day basis. It's how they handle their waste streams. It's recycling, all of those things. So so I think that's the bigger focus, really. It's part of a broader picture of sustainability that really the citizens, at least in our area in South Florida, come to expect. That's the expectation. It's not just a good thing to do. It's an expectation to be done, whether or not a regulation requires it.
Thank you. And Molly, how do these challenges that the maritime industry is facing impact the marine ecosystems and the biodiversity within them?
Thank you for that, Megan, and thank you for having me on this panel today. So with a background, really when I was in my undergraduate focusing on biology, was on marine biology. And so an environmentalist in my education, and then coming into the maritime industry and seeing the balance between the two, It's fundamental, and I'm sure both Glenn and Buddy can speak to these based off of their current practices and their backgrounds in the Coast Guard. And part of this is aligned with MARPOL, but also, when we talk about marine ecosystems, it's not just the open ocean. It's not just transversing, the Atlantic Ocean, the Pacific Ocean. We're talking about things like wetlands and coral reefs. We're talking about navigational channels. We're talking about inland waterways, where you have, more than 10% of the world's population lives along the coastline, right? So you're talking about, these delicate marine ecosystems that have their own form of a intricate balance, have this type of resiliency. And it's wanting to protect that resiliency and preserve it at the same time. Whether it's oil spills or it's eutrophication. So things, when you don't have proper sewage or waste management practices in place, things like eutrophication, which may in the moment may not seem like the end of the world, but when you introduce those phosphates, the nitrogen, you are actually, going to cause potentially an algal bloom. You're going to see those fish kill-offs is what they call them. And, you have the impacts of ocean acidification, and these are things that affect these really already delicate marine ecosystems and just make them even more delicate. And then when you talk about biodiversity, you decrease the abundance of certain species that already live there. And ones that, talking about sharks and green sea turtles, these species, they don't reproduce until they're, 15, 16, 17, 18 years old, right? And, if they're not reaching that ability to reproduce, that is going to impact their biodiversity and, the care overall. So, yeah.
Thank you so much, Molly. Buddy, do you have anything to add, especially being up in Alaska with such an incredibly diverse ecosystem?
Well, it's as Glenn and Molly talked about, it is a system. It's an ecosystem, and you have to look at the totality of everything. And up here in Alaska, there is a lot of subsistence lifestyles, that they are dependent on a healthy, stable environment. And it is a systemic approach. Glenn mentioned some of the other things, with marine debris, invasive species, ballast, and Molly's mentioning, it's just not the ocean, the blue ocean. It's also the coastal environment, the wetlands, as Molly pointed out. And, as I was preparing for this, I was doing some reading and everything, and I was amazed at how much of the marine debris is actually shore-based. That's where the largest part of it comes into. So we're talking about protecting the marine environment. The shipping industry has a part to it, but everybody has a part to it. The communities, the coastal communities, people, individuals that are recreating on the water and everything on the coastline or on the water itself. And that's where the challenge comes. It is a multifaceted way that you have to think about things. And, I'm very much about systemic, everything is a system. And it all works together. So you have to look at the totality of things that both Glenn and Molly have mentioned. Yeah.
Yes. Now, Glenn, from a port perspective, what are some regulations and policies that influence your organization's approach to environmental stewardship?
Well, I think, the regulations obviously establish the minimum requirements, but, the approach that we've taken here at Port Everglades, we're a county department, so we're part of Broward County government, is not looking at what you're required to do, but what are you doing voluntarily to, to sort of press out the boundary beyond that. So we do things like, I don't know if you're familiar with the Green Marine certification program. So we were one of the first ports in the United States to sign up to participate in that program, and we've been participating for many years. Artificial reefs, and looking, and thinking about, the last question about, climate change here in South Florida. We've got a lot of challenges with sea level rise. Whatever the reason is, it's occurring. And how do we address that at the port level? Little things where for Earth Day, because this is about Earth Day. Next, we have a volunteer program for oyster gardening, which we take oyster shells and put them back out in the community to provide those seeds really to restore environments that used to have that. So it's the things like that we try to focus on. It's not what a regulation requires you to do, but what are you doing over and above what the requirements are because it's the right thing to do.
Mm-hmm. And Molly, what are some initiatives that NAMEPA might be working on, or some other opportunities for environmental stewardship?
Thank you, Megan. So, well, at NAMEPA, we believe in everything from the individual, like Buddy pointed out, communities, corporations, and really with the alignment of the SDGs, so the Sustainable Development Goals set by the UN. And when we talk about individuals, we talk about everything from recycling, reusing, repurposing. And what sometimes people don't realize is, those are the 3 R's that most of us grew up with, but we actually have 5 R's. And the first one is actually refuse. So that's like the first, kind of fundamental step is really talking about the individual actions and how those can kind of play a role. So like to Buddy's point, most of marine debris does come from shoreside, actually people not realizing the everyday habits that they have. But then the second piece of that is really community engagement. And so one of the things that NAMEPA does, and I am so proud of and champion, and Megan, you're part of it, is our beach cleanups. So partnering with our members, our alliances, educational groups, doing cleanups in the community, having that visibility is so important, but then doing something together that offers an opportunity, to your point, Glenn, about volunteering, but also just demonstrating that, collectively we are in this together and that we all as a group have a role to play. And one of the things that we do is we do those cleanups, with groups like the American Club we have for World Ocean Day coming up. Like Fairfield Chemical Carriers, we've done it with, like our Earth Day cleanup this weekend with WISTA. So it's really taking it to the next level of saying, what can you volunteer to do? And, why is it the right thing? So that intrinsic motivation along the way. And then when we talk about, the corporate side and, companies as a whole and, the work that they're doing, part of it is that volunteer work. And it's recognizing that sustainability is a journey. And so NAMEPA Sustainability Director, Marcella, she's incredible. And she's done phenomenal work with the NAMEPA Maritime Sustainability Passport Program. And really focusing on the effectiveness of your ESG performance, stakeholder visibility, and actually calling it a transformative journey. So recognizing that sustainability is not a one-off, but recognizing that it is a journey and that it does require planning, it requires transparency, but it also, it's about positive change. Right? And so at NAMEPA, one of the works that we do is our MSP program. And it's really assessing where groups fall under the E, the S, and the G, and helping organizations create that roadmap and really try to paint a picture of what their journey is going to look like, whether it's, a month from now, a year from now, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, and so on, and keeping that alignment with the SDGs.
Wonderful. And Buddy, what are some regulations and policy influences that your organization is using to approach environmental stewardship?
Well, I mean, my business, oil spill response, I mean, the obvious one is Open 90, the Oil Pollution Act of Open 90. I mean, that was a pivotal moment in how the United States is going to kind of regulate and monitor and put in standards for the shipping industry, as well as anybody that's managing fuel. That it just wasn't for shipping, it was also for refineries and other shoreside facilities and everything. But then you also, before that, you still had MARPOL that you featured last year as part of your series and everything. Your education series was a MARPOL series. And once again, and that's, as Megan talks about, that's an evolution. I mean, they're always updating, even Open 90 gets updated. The MARPOL regulations from the IMO are constantly being reviewed. But then you have other folks that are also looking at, the Arctic Council. What does that look like now? Now that the ice pack is receding up in the Arctic, you're seeing more and more shipping taking place in the Arctic, more and more human activity along the coastal zones and everything else. So they're now undertaking. What does this look like? And you had the polar codes that were enacted for operating up in the Arctic. So, and there's just a lot of host of other things, the Marine Mammal Protection Act, the Madsen-Stevenson Act for fisheries and so forth, and the National Environment Policy Act. So those are all been driving factors. But, to Glenn's and Molly's point, it's just not about the regulations and policies. You have industry groups are also developing their best standards of care, best practices. Okay, how can we establish best practice? We don't need regulators to tell us what's right to do and how to best policy. Let's do this. And I kind of equate it to industry has been very good about safety. And a lot of that was driven by regulations, but they've made that part of the culture. We don't want anybody to ever get hurt. Safety. Well, that now has to translate over to the environment. Protecting the environment is good business. That's the bottom line. It's good business. So how do we instill that as a culture, as a statement, as a journey, not something that's a program? Well, let's just do this. You don't want it to be a program. You want it to be instilled as part of this is our culture. This is what we do naturally and everything else. I don't need to be told what's right and how to protect the environment. Let's just do it and so forth.
Very well said. Thank you, buddy. Now, Glenn, we're seeing a lot of technology innovations happening over the past couple of years, and they seem to continue growing every single day. So in what ways can technology be utilized to mitigate environmental impacts of maritime activities?
Well, I think that there's a lot of things that are going on, first on the ship side where we already talked about alternative fuels to reduce the carbon footprint, and carbon neutral, zero carbon, whatever it may be. But they're doing things, they're not waiting for that to occur. There's things like, innovative hull coatings, air bubbles, to increase that efficiency. So, to go from point A to point B. We've been having conversations, and I know Carlene is on here about, establishing a green corridor, where you get commitments from the business, the companies, the carriers that are in that trade to make those commitments. Once again, goes back to that, not because someone read a regulation that said you have to do it, because it's the right thing to do. Here at Port Everglades, we're focusing on shore power. Providing shore power. We are the third largest cruise port in the world for home ports. So literally hundreds of ships here and spend 8 to 12 hours in the port. So if they can shut off their engines, even though most of the ships that are here now, cruise ships, have scrubbers, but scrubbers is a trade-off as well. You're reducing the emission, but you're not eliminating it. So we're working on an initiative with our major cruise brands here to install shore power. It's not cheap, but nevertheless, it has a significant reduction in overall emissions here in South Florida. Because one of the things about shore power, it's if like we have, I'm looking out my window, there's a power plant, a quarter mile away. It's running on natural gas, which is a more efficient fuel than the gas oil or the scrubbed heavy fuel oil. So that's looking at what are those incremental things to do. And so there's just a couple of examples. And our focus from the port perspective is if we can provide that ability for that ship to plug in. We're starting with cruise ships, and then as we go beyond that, we're going to start looking at cargo ships to be able to reduce that environmental footprint while they're in our port.
Wonderful. Now, Molly, from a teaching side, what kind of technology are you using or witnessing for environmental awareness?
So I just wanted to rewind a little bit there, and then I'll jump into that side of it. But one of the things, and it's more of a general statement, is, and I'm sure we'll also talk about it, that I'm passionate about, is workforce development. I have 120 students this year that I see every day. And they care about sustainability. They care about the environment. They all, you probably keep on seeing me drinking my water, but all of my kids have, most of them have reusable water bottles, right? It's those little tiny habits that have changed over time Here in Connecticut, we have a ban on plastic bags, for example. So they're used to reusable bags. These are things that have become like the norm for them. And it's trying to integrate that into society, where society is pushing for it, right? So Carlene in the past has talked about, the global demands, and this is one of the global demands, is sustainability. When it comes to an education side, I think that, our maritime academies, they're doing incredible work when it comes to training and what does it look like for the future of our maritime personnel. I think when it comes to high school and middle schools, we have incredible programs that are especially on the rise. Working with MIPSIC and working with some of these high schools and these middle schools, on their curriculum, and, what does the pathway look like for a student or a non-traditional student for that matter. One thing is clear, and it's that, Buddy had said it, a healthy ocean is crucial for the maritime industry. A healthy ocean or healthy water, period, waterways, means that you have a productive and a safe marine or maritime environment.
Wonderful. Now moving to that technology side, Buddy.
Well,
What?
Well,
Oh, yeah,
no,
go
no,
ahead.
I just wanted to add on the technology side. One of the things that we've been investing in over the years is automatic identification systems, AIS, and you're seeing more and more satellite providers are putting up more macro, micro, I guess, satellites up there so that you can better track the movement of vessels. And that's very important because we've been also able to develop geofencing, electronic fencings around very sensitive areas. So we monitor very closely breeding grounds for various marine mammals that's up in Alaska. So we can put we can put geofencing around that, and then we can warn mariners not to get too close to these breeding areas for the marine mammals and other aspects of it. And we also use it we were able to get a grant from the Arctic Domain Awareness Center, which is part of the Department of Homeland Security Center of Excellence, Science and Technology Director of Office of University Programs, to where we established what we call dynamic geofencing, to where we can put it around tankers. And most of people don't realize up in Alaska, Western Alaska, there's about 150 plus communities out there. There's no road system to these communities, so they have to get their fuel via tankers. Well, the large tankers can't get up close to the beach, so they have to offload their fuel offshore to barges that then go up into the rivers and everything else. So we're able to put geofencing around these tankers so we know when all this is happening. We can watch it live when things are going up there. And those are just some of the ways to use technology to further have awareness, because that's what it's all about. What's awareness? And then to educate the mariners that are out there just transiting, please remain offshore. Go further offshore, so you don't disrupt this sensitive breeding area or things like that. Or when there's high sensitive activities like tanker lightering operation, you bring two tankers together, you'd like to know what's going on. Just make sure things are good, So those are some ways that technology is really helping to leverage and use as a tool to better protect the environment and just have more situational awareness out there that we can provide that information to the proper people.
Wonderful. Now, Glenn, do you want to add? Go ahead, Molly.
I just wanted to add something there too, and you sparked my thought process, Buddy. Two things. One, to your point about using AI, though, in general, one of our
Yes.
alliances is actually with IC, so EYSEA, and they're a nonprofit organization whose really their mission is to map pollution and maritime hazards. So actually, I have the app on my phone. I encourage you to download it, but it's an opportunity to take pictures of marine debris that you're seeing, and through AI training, and then also through satellite images, being able to track really mapping out marine debris that exists along the coastline, also in the open ocean. So that's one other piece of technology. And then I also wanted to just shout out to the different simulations that exist. Being able to, somebody coming as an I say outsider of maritime, I fell into maritime is what I always say. Seeing these simulations is absolutely incredible. and seeing the abilities of them. And I just wanted to throw that out there as technology exists when it comes to marine environment awareness. I do think that there maybe is an opportunity to see how we could have some simulations about why it's important, you know? So my 2 cents.
Thank you, Molly. Now I'm going to move into more of the economic side. Glenn, how do you balance economic interests with environmental conservation efforts at the Port Everglades?
No, good question, Megan. And I did want to circle back on one thing that Molly talked about earlier about workforce development, because one of the things that we've done here at Port Everglades is, and we've had it in place for 7 years now, is an environmental intern program. We have a lot of universities here in South Florida, so, and they're not paid internships. They come in, they get college credit for them, but we provide them the opportunity to learn about the port environment and work on real projects, not just, I think back in my younger days, an intern just sort of followed somebody around and then signed a paper, okay, they get their credit. So, so they're given substantive projects up to the point that one of our interns actually made a presentation to the U.S. Coral Reef Task Force on, the things that we were doing here at Port Everglades. But, circling back to your question about balancing economic interests, and it's always a difficult thing. You think about a port environment where we're what's called an enterprise fund in Broward County government. So our revenue pays for the port. It keeps it running. But there are a lot of things when it comes to environmental protection that are intangible. You can't measure them on a dollars and cents basis, and because if you're looking at them purely on how much does it cost, shore power to outfit eight cruise berths and simultaneously feed 8 large cruise ship, $175 million project. It's not something you're going to get back by incrementally selling the power thing back. So, but it's the right thing to do. So, as from a port's perspective, when we look at our environmental initiatives, we're looking at the return on the investment, but it's not just the dollars and cents return on the investment, because a lot of environmental benefits are very difficult to quantify. I went to graduate school way back when. My bio didn't say when, it just said where. But that was one of the things that I studied, was how do you quantify the environmental benefits of a reduction in emissions around a port environment. It's not just the port, it's the surrounding community. And if you just did it purely on a dollars and cents basis, it wouldn't make economic sense, but that's part of the investment, the broader investment in the community that pays dividends, not in, oh, we got more revenue because of that, but because of the benefit to the community. So from a port's perspective, that we see as a critical piece of it.
Thank you. Buddy, do you have anything to add on that?
Well, no, I totally share Glenn's thoughts on that. Part of this is very much intrinsic, and it is hard to quantify the value of certain things, and how do you measure prevention? How do you quantify the value of protecting the environment? But I think part of that gets into, one of the things that, as I look to the future, how do you quantify some of that? I think Molly, mentioned it, simulations and artificial intelligence. I think those are going to be some very powerful tools down the line that you can try to quantify it to a certain degree. You're never going to be able to do exactly, but it is important to try to do it in some capacity, because policymakers want that. If you're trying to get funds from the government, public funds, from the federal or at the local state or the local area, they got to see the tangible. Everybody understands the intangible. Yes, it feels good, I'm breathing cleaner air, but there still always has to be a business case. And that's where I think some tools like with simulation, artificial intelligence can help us better articulate that to policymakers so that we can get some other funds. Because I look at it, to work on this, to protect the environment. It's just not up to it's not a business alone to do it. It's not for the city or county. It's not for the individual alone to do it, or for the government alone to do it. It's a community-based approach. I'm not all, I hear a lot in my world, well, let's take an all government approach. And I'm like, well, no, let's take an all community approach. Government is one aspect of it. We need everybody in the game here. Everybody, from childhood all the way up to you reaching my age and everything else. So this is the full gamut. And it requires industry working in collaboration, not just partnership, but in collaboration, working together, the public, private, and non-profit sectors all getting together, using their respective brain trusts to move this forward, to articulate the tangible and the intangibles, to keep moving forward.
Wonderful, and perfect segue to talk about that role that partnerships and collaborations play. So Molly, what is that, and how does that role play into advancing practices within the maritime industry in regards to environmental awareness?
So I would say that NAMEPA would not be possible without our partnerships and our members, frankly, right? So the work that we do would not be possible without, the engagement that we have and the commitment that we have. The 3 words to sum up NAMEPA and our mission is to save our seas. But the other piece to that is bridging maritime commerce and conservation. So as Buddy pointed out, it's collaboration. We may at sometimes intrinsically believe we can do it all, but we can't, right? And that's where, we have to rely on those who can support us, again, for collective action together. Sharing experiences, sharing expertise, and sharing resources, incredible, right? There was one conference, Shipping Insight, actually, I believe it was last year's Shipping Insight conference, talking about what does it look like for sharing resources, especially when it comes to decarbonization, and what does it look like having that transparency of, trial, I don't say trial and error, but trialing things out, and, what are we leaning towards, or what is one group leaning towards and why? Talking about the development side and implementing some of these new technologies. It comes down to piloting almost, for example, right? So, what one company pilots, maybe that's going to work for another one, but, what can some learn in different aspects from it? That goes in line with like the risk management pieces to it, transparency and accountability. When it comes to partnerships with education groups, there's opportunity, whether it is workforce development, or even upscaling. So how do we train our staff? How do we train our teams to be more environmentally aware and more environmentally conscious? When it comes to engineering designs and with long-term, sustainability, the word just sustainable itself coming to mind, meaning long-term. I think that there's, Buddy said it like kind of perfectly and summed it up, that collaboration really is key. And when it comes to, partners and members and alliances and, whoever it is that you work with, it's having that shared collective hope and mission, to do better, right? So.
Thank you, Molly. Glenn, do you have anything to add on your partnerships that you have?
No, I think from a port's perspective, we have a lot of partnerships here with our port users. One example, and we're working with them right now, we have under the Port Infrastructure Development Program, there's an opportunity for grant funds, and we're working with 2 of our container terminal operators who will partner with us. They'll actually be the ones who spend the money, and it's going to either zero emission or lower emission equipment within their terminals, increasing their efficiencies. But there's a couple other partnerships that we're proud to be part of. One is here in South Florida. It's called the Marine Hub, and it's a number of different organizations, and its focus is on finding those smaller startup companies that are working on the technology initiatives of various types. We have coral reefs offshore here, very sensitive. We have a deepening project that we're trying to get through those coral reefs, and we'll get there eventually. Things like living shorelines, as an example, and providing the opportunity for those startups who came out of a university environment in most cases to focus. Another one that we also participate in is an organization called Ocean Exchange, which has a competition every year and provides prizes. Prizes like the $100,000 prize for the winning, which is really, it's set up to provide the opportunity for developing and pushing the edge on the technologies. So, that's just a couple of examples of the kind of partnerships that we're involved in at the port level.
Thank you. And Buddy, do you want to talk a little bit more about your partnerships that you have and maybe some of the communities and local stakeholders that you work with?
Well, some of the partnerships that we have, some are more formal, some are more informal. Some of the more formal ones are like the harbors and waterway safety committees, and you see those across the country. And we have those up in Alaska. We have several of them up here, and I find those are very powerful committees because it's all about port safety, waterway safety, which ultimately is about protecting the environment, and everything else. And the thing that I find inspirational about those committees is they're not funded. These are all volunteers. The various organizations all volunteers their time to how can we make the waterway safer? How can we protect the environment? And this has industry groups, this has government groups, public and private industry. It has nonprofit organization. It has individual citizens that just want to participate on the community. So I think that's very powerful, and to keep those going, education wise and so forth. Other partnerships, like one of the things that we started, one of our initiatives, and as I say, one of my themes is always collaboration, collaboration, collaboration. We just all need to work together. Is when I talked about those tanker lightering operations, they last year, just as we're getting ready to go into the new season, they delivered almost 140 million gallons of fuel was transferred from one ship to another to be delivered. And it was done without any spills and everything, because we created a committee of what we call best practices for the tanker operations. And we got all the tanker operators together because they were all competitors against each other, but they all did their own thing. And they're all doing their operations in their own specific areas. And we said, you can't do that anymore. We got to join forces. We got to have same operating parameters and be located that if there's an incident, we can respond to it, and so forth. The government agency, federal and state, was there, the communities, and we also have an environmental organization that sits at the table. And we've now developed a best practice guide for that, and all the industry follows that. So that's a collaboration, and they meet routinely throughout the year. How are operations going? With feedback, and they share it with each other. And that's the power of the collaboration that we need to keep going forth. Is that, and that was basically an informal group that we created that's now kind of become a standing group. And now when I hold meetings, I get up to 40, 50 people attend these things, most of it virtually, but they're all interested in it. But then, like I said, the Harbor Waterway Safety Committees, I think, are very powerful. And then you have other standing committees that are more regulated, like area committees for oil spill response and so forth. And all those need to take place, all of those things. Yep.
Thank you. Now, Molly, I know how we promote environmental awareness through NAMEPA, but how do you promote it through your students?
So the easiest way is case studies, right? So we learn best by what didn't work, right? So by looking at where things didn't go right, reflecting, and then how do we make those changes for the future? So, and we're actually doing this with part of MARPOL, working with the New York Harbor School, actually, and a class of students is looking at the different annexes in correlation to case studies about them. So why is Annex 1 important? Well, let's reflect back on what happened and how things needed to change. So it's really about, painting a picture of how we can, again, do better, but also making it more of an intrinsic motivation. So less of, memorization and saying, you need to know this, and it's more of the how and why. So making it more of an intrinsic and less of a, okay, extrinsic, here's your reward, you're going to get an A in the class. And more of, okay, well, doesn't it feel good to do something right? You know, that moral piece that you kind of battle with, and having them see that there's kind of like this hope and this beauty that comes along the way of working together, and having that you know, the belief that they are capable of doing something and solving a problem.
Thank you. Glenn, how do you promote environmental awareness in your port employees and other stakeholders?
Oops.
Oh, you're on mute, Glenn.
Sorry about that. I clicked the wrong button. No, so, you know, how do you promote environmental awareness? Well, first off, you know, you what did they say? You know, you got to walk the talk, so to speak, is by demonstrating to the community. It's outreach. We have a newsletter that goes out to all port users once a month, and that includes environmental related types of things. We meet with community groups. As we're working on projects at the port, we engage with the stakeholders to get their views, you know, because that's really, it's got to be a collaboration. I think we've heard that a number of times. It can't be, you know, we know best, and that's what we're going to do. You know, obviously somebody's got to make a decision at some point on things, because I've seen too many times, you know, there's paralysis. Analysis, what did I say? Analysis paralysis. You know, we're studying something to death and we never get to solving the problem. But you know, I think that's the key, is knowing who the stakeholders are in the community, being active and being out there, proactive rather than reacting to things that come in. You know, in my bio, I'm also president of the Florida Ocean Alliance, which is made up of 28 different organizations: public sector, private sector, academic, nonprofit, and government. And that's really what we try to do from the state of Florida's perspective, is sort of bring together those different groups and interact and try to take advantage of the synergies that are out there. So that's sort of my thoughts on that particular one.
Thank you. And Buddy, do you have anything to add?
Well, you know, I very much believe what Glenn said. You know, you got to walk the talk. You know, for our organization, where I try to help instill it in the culture and everything we do, you know, we're part of what we call the Green Star program up in Alaska, about recycling, waste management, water usage, and everything else, reducing our footprint on the environment. And then also we participate in NAMEPA's Maritime Sustainability Passport Program. I think that's very important. My board of executive are my board of director are maritime executives in the shipping industry, the fuel distribution system. And when I told them this is where I want to go, they were all like, yes, that's the right thing to do. Let's do that. Even though I'm not publicly traded, I don't have a large footprint, but we are a service provider to the maritime industry, to the fuel distribution industry. So we want to show that we believe in this. We're going to take this journey with you. And it also shows my employees, this is where we're going, and this is how we're going to think, to the point that it was heartening that a lot of just small little things, you know, your gas powered drills, weed eaters, you know, we got buildings and things to maintain and so forth. They got rid of all our small gas powered equipment and shifted over to battery operated equipment. I didn't have to tell them that. They said, okay, let's we know what we should be doing. So it's those little acts that, if everybody does those little acts, boy, that adds up, you know. So, but it gets to what Glenn says, you got to walk the talk and you have to show it and everything. So
Thank you, Buddy. And I've got one final question before we ask our audience for any questions. But looking ahead, what are some emerging trends or opportunities in promoting the marine environmental sustainability within the maritime industry? And Molly, I'm going to start with you.
Loaded question. And buddy, you set me up for success. So, you know, and I lean back on our individuals, our communities, our corporations, the way we at NAMEPA line it up. You know, from an economic standpoint, you know, you see industries, not just maritime, but, you know, many industries are moving away from the economic model where you're taking, you're making, and you're disposing. And we're seeing more of that circular economy, you know, promotion and pathways that, you know, incorporate a circular economy. You know, we at NAMEPA have had an intern previously who talked about life cycle assessment guidelines. And what does that look like when you talk about the well to wake calculations? And when you look at maritime, you know, and to Buddy's point about NAMEPA's MSP program, part of your sustainable journey is actually looking at your current practices. So where are you at before you can start to make a plan? Where are you actually at right now? How do you assess yourselves and reflect on where do you stand? And then from there, it helps give you greater insight and a much larger picture of your performance over time, you know, your strengths, your weaknesses, and continuing to find areas to improve. So just because you improve in one area doesn't mean you improved across the whole board. And then based on those insights, how can you set even more realistic goals and, you know, progress overall, enhancing transparency and credibility. So, Buddy, you pointed out to your employees, right? You know, having companies having their sustainability reporting, sustainability practices being something that's part of their company mission, their values, is not just as an employee, but in your community is incredibly powerful. And you know, those commitments can't be vague anymore. You know, global society will not allow them to be vague. And this is how you can build trust, whether it's with stakeholders, you know, unlocking new opportunities that may exist, the regulatory side, right? You know, you don't want to just do something because it's regulated. You want to do it because it's the right thing to do. So, and NAMEPA can help you.
Thank you, Molly. Glenn, do you have anything to add?
No, I think what we're going to see when you talk about emerging trends is, you know, and we talked about technology already, but it really it's a fundamental, you know, rethinking of shipping, you know, and new designs. You know, there's some out there that are trying to do things with wind, and those are all little incremental things, but you know, they clearly what's not going to change is the world's reliance on the maritime shipping to move goods. Was it, depending on which reference you read, you know, it's 90+% of the world's goods are moving on ships. And whether we talk about nearshoring or anything else, you're still going to heavily reliant on the maritime industry. And I think the industry has recognized and accepted the challenge, being, you know, moved along by IMO. There are many that believe that IMO isn't moving fast enough. So I think we're going to see over the years that those leaders in the industry stepping forward, and I don't want to name any names of particular companies, but you know, they're out there and they're going, as we said earlier, not because a regulation says they have to do it. They're doing it because it's the right thing to do, and it's costing them money, and that potentially creates a competitive disadvantage for them compared to others. But that's where you get into the benefits, the unquantifiable benefits, and that's really where they're going. But that's sort of what I have to add on that particular one.
Thank you so much, Glenn. And Buddy, what about you? You're seeing any emerging trends?
Well, what I'm seeing is, I'm just echoing what Molly and Glenn said. You know, the marine transportation system is going through a major transformation right now with decarbonization, but also with just the world trade, you know, globalization and everything else in the blue economy. I mean, the world's population continues to grow exponentially, you know, so that just creates more and more demand on the marine transportation to supply the goods, but then escalates and creates possible other risk and everything. And there's new advancements in technology and everything else that's going to be able to be used to help manage all these new emerging trends that are developing at very rapid pace. I mean, it's amazing how fast things are moving. But my one caution with all that is it all comes back down to, it does take people. The fundamental thing is it takes people, it takes our intellectual capacity, it takes us working together to manage this. Technology is nothing more than a tool. That's it. Where you place that tool and how you use it, that's up to us as a community to figure out where best to use it and how best to use it to protect the environment.
Thank you so much. Now it's our time to turn it over to our audience. So if anyone has any questions that they would like to ask.
I have been
How did I know?
First off, I want to thank Buddy, Molly, and Glenn so much for their contributions today. What a great way to celebrate Earth Day by talking about what the industry is doing and can be doing to preserve it. And I just want to also point out, Glenn and Port Everglades also earned their MSP, their Maritime Sustainability Passport. They were the first
Thank
port
you.
to do so. And congratulations on that. And then the
Thank you,
other thing, of
Carlin.
course, I want to mention is that the two women on this call were at one time NAMEPA interns. And we were talking about the internship program earlier. It's sort of like the Hotel California. Once you check in, you can't check out. But we're delighted at the gifts that they've brought to NAMEPA and continue to do so. Because as you said, Buddy, it's all about the people. And finally, I just want to acknowledge how pleased I am to see the shift. Another shift that's come into our industry is this level of collaboration. I think the silos that used to exist, for instance, Glenn, between the ships and the ports are breaking down, and there's an integration and a recognition that we have shared responsibilities and shared opportunities to deliver the safe, efficient, and well, I won't say emission-free yet. Talk to me in another 10 years. An environmentally benign service of goods and energy to the public. And that's our role, our responsibility, and we continue to improve in that. And I guess what I would like to ask each one of the four people on the screen, what would be, there's a wonderful, it's not a commercial because it's longer than 30 seconds, but Apple did a great Mother Earth sustainability video. And the best part for me was the stare down between Mother Earth and Tim Cook. So I recommend everybody take a look at it. But if each of the four of you had a wish for Earth Day, what would that wish be? I'm going to start with Molly. It's not fair to start with Glenn or Buddy.
Oh, you're so kind. I think that I would wish for more individual engagement. I think that we, Carlene, the quote, if they can't see it, they can't dream it. It's applicable even in this kind of a conversation where, you know, you can't rely on just one person to do it all. But you also can't rely on that people know. And so there's that part that education really plays a fundamental role.
And every action counts.
Every action counts, and change one habit, change the world.
Okay. How about you, Buddy?
Well, Molly said it. I mean, that's where I was going. That and I just loved it because I agree. It starts at the individual level, and I would just love to be able to see more people out on the highways with their bags, picking up the garbage on Earth Days. Communities hold events. Many communities, our community holds an Earth Day event, but I'd love to see more people out there. I want and everything else, because it does start at the community, at the individual level, and that's how you build it. And that's how you build the groundswell. As you engage, and as Molly talks about with the students and everything else, as part of the curriculum, part of the discussion and everything else. But yes, I think it's about just getting the individuals out there, because it gets into what's in it for me. Well, this environment is your home. That's the bottom line. This environment is your home, and you have to take care of it for it to take care of you.
Okay, thank you. Megan.
I wish for Earth Day every day, so that the mentality of it is not just April. It's not just, as around Earth Day or World Ocean Day. It's every day that everyone is waking up going, what small change can I make today in my daily habits that can help the marine environment?
Okay, thanks. Glenn?
No, that's great. And Megan took mine, but I'll go the opposite direction of Molly. Thinking back to my Coast Guard days and focused on teamwork and working together, and a little slogan I have on a piece of paper here somewhere: no one of us is as strong as all of us. So it's taking that individual energy and packaging it and focusing on the environmental challenges that we all face, whether it's at the local level, the national level, or internationally. And so that's my wish for Earth Day, is that all of those individuals come together and use their collective power to solve the challenges that we have in our world today.
Excellent. Thank you all.
All right. Well, thank you everyone so much for joining us this afternoon. We would like to invite you to our Safety at Sea seminar and Amber and Bankert Awards, which are happening in May in National Maritime Week. It's not just a day this year, it's an entire week. So we're looking forward to that discussion being hosted at ABS in Washington, D.C. Registration information can be found on our website, as well as an agenda and all of the over 40 organizations that are supporting us for National Maritime Week. During that National Maritime Week, we are also hosting, go ahead, Carlene.
When you say over 40 organizations, it's not that you have to be over 40 to participate.
We have over 40 supporting organizations, 40 different organizations coming in with us. We're also hosting our second regional gathering for the DC metropolitan area. This will be on Thursday, May 23rd at ABS from 10 to 2. You can join us in Washington, D.C., where we'll have an open dialogue talking about the critical aspects of workforce development, including strategies for attracting young people into maritime careers and bridging that gap between commerce and conservation. But thank you everyone so much for joining us this afternoon. Look forward to our next Sea Safety series, which will be in the beginning of May, which will interview some of our Amber awardees. So thank you so much for joining us this afternoon, and have a great evening.
Thanks again,
Megan,
everyone.
thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you.